Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. We are talking to Haiti via Skype. Patrick Moynihan, one of the original thinkers behind the Haitian project down in the country of Haiti, one of the most economically depressed areas. This is a genesis that started in Providence, Rhode Island. Mr. Moynihan, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's glad to be here.
So, one of the most innovative projects, you've had tremendous success in a country that has oftentimes little success, impacted by hurricanes, earthquakes, profound poverty. You're trying to build really a middle class from the education substructure in that country, taking young men and women, kids 7th grade on up, to get them ready for colleges and universities. Talk a little bit about the initiative and then some big news you guys have made on a recent decision.
Yes, we're very happy with the success of our graduates. Our program is aimed at creating the human capital necessary for Haiti to have the leadership to emerge fully as a nation and to function completely. This is a really proud nation. It's the second oldest republic in the Western Hemisphere, and so much is amazing and so much to be proud about in terms of Haiti's history. But it has, as you said, struggled tremendously during that history, now over 200 years of independence, at trying to achieve a truly functional government and also have an economy large enough for the people in it. So it is a difficult situation. And what our young men and women are doing is going through school. We then support them to go to university in Haiti. They graduate and then go on into professional jobs. And I'm proud to say they come from very difficult backgrounds, households that are trying to survive on less than $1,000 a year per family. And they themselves end up as professionals, accountants, working as teachers, lawyers, working in management and other activities, all professionals, earning $12,000 to $15,000 a year on average within 2 or 3 years of leaving university. And we're very proud that 90% of our graduates, just around 90% of our graduates, have remained in Haiti and are working every day to improve the lives of others as well as their own families.
You made a bold statement of rejecting a charitable donation from Robert Kraft, head of the New England Patriots. He's also the head of a number of other corporate entities, of $100,000. And you made the decision why?
Well, we were offered by Dan Sackler, who works with Mr. Kraft, $100,000 in support of our work in Haiti. And unfortunately, under the current conditions, it was unacceptable for us to take it. I think as we just recounted, we are in the very direct business of educating men and women to go on to healthy, productive lives. And the opposite of that would be a life in prostitution or involved in the sex trade. And so given the current situation, it's just not possible for us to accept that gift with the lack of clarity in Mr. Kraft's situation. So it was very difficult, but we chose not to accept the gift. However, I think it is important for the record to know that we did offer, I personally offered in 2 different formats. One first in the email when we made response to Dan Sackler's offer, and then again in a personal letter accompanied by those emails to make sure that Mr. Kraft himself would have the opportunity to see it, offered to say, it is a way, if you're serious about reclaiming your public reputation and using your platform for good, let's sit down and talk about how that would work and what it would take to make the situation acceptable for us to take the gift. And we never got a response.
So it's interesting. We as a news organization write about some of these relationships regularly. We'd written a series of stories about Governor Raimondo accepting campaign donations from the Sackler family tied to the overdose and opiate industry through their ownership of Purdue Pharma. After a number of articles, she decided to finally donate those donations to her campaign. This must have been difficult. You've been at business for more than 30 years. You've probably taken some money from some, I'll use the term, scoundrels over those years. How do you balance those things over the course of decades of fundraising within both a local community here in Rhode Island and a global community?
Well, I have been engaged in finding funds. I mean, without a doubt, I am very proud to say that I have advocated. I'm a mendicant in that sense. I beg for the money that we need in order to do the work that we are doing in Haiti, where there is not the financial assets to provide education. So that's absolutely what I do, is go out to find funds. And I just think it's important to clarify that I have never knowingly taken money from anybody who has, in my understanding, been a scoundrel. The only scoundrel I actually know is myself. I work every day to reform that. And so I think it's important to understand that we're all sinners in need of God's mercy and redemption. This isn't about our personal actions.
Sure.
What makes it particularly difficult in this case is Mr. Kraft's public actions. And those aren't the ones that potentially would be publicized through the videotape. And we should talk about my thoughts on whether that videotape should be seen or not seen. You might be surprised by that I do not think it should be seen by the public. I don't think there's a value in that. It should be reviewed by the court. It should be reviewed by the jury and the judge, the public has no need to see that. What I think is important here is to understand in this particular case, because of what we do in Haiti and because where we work from, a developing country and specifically Haiti, the issue of the sex trade and prostitution, which is part of the sex trade, presents an exceptionally wrong message for us to be involved with. Because I'm not sure if you're aware, but Haiti was devastated by the impact of the sex trade there was sex tourism in Haiti. I'm sure there still is to a certain extent, but it was rampant. And Haiti in the late 70s, early 80s, unfortunately, AIDS was brought here and transmitted to the people in the country through that sex trade.
Sure.
So we have a very specific, it is our responsibility to be adamantly against prostitution in the sex trade. And again, it's not about saying to Mr. Kraft, you personally in your actions that have been alleged to have happened on those 2 days at the spa, you've done something wrong. That's between him and God, right? And in my case, since I'm a Catholic, it would be between myself, my confessor, and God. But the point here is that we're looking at his public actions.
Sure.
And what is extremely concerning are three things. But the most important of that is that he is yet to denounce prostitution and the sex trade, and since he's left that sort of hanging there, and because he's done that, the other day NBC referred to what he was allegedly involved in as, being an activity with ladies of the night.
Yeah,
let's be very serious here. There's nothing romantic. There's nothing Pretty Woman about prostitution and the sex trade, and there's certainly nothing about the night when you're talking about something happening in the broad daylight, right in the midst of the public. This is a shopping mall, right? And the woman performing it is expected to go from room to room like an assembly line.
Right.
When you think about the gravity of the inhumanity of that, there is no way with that out there and unaddressed that we could ever take these funds.
Right. Any contemplation on the fact that he has not been found guilty?
Again, notice I'm not here to speak about Mr. Kraft's personal actions, but when he apologized for what has precipitated from his actions, he very, very narrowly stated, I'm embarrassed my family, I embarrassed the team, and so forth, the people of New England. Nowhere there did he mention, and I want to tell you, regardless of what I might have done or have not done, that I believe that sex trade is wrong and prostitution is extremely wrong. And if you should, I just want to say something here that we can pick up later, but please do put it into your question memory.
Please.
We need to talk about the fact that, there's something rotten in Palm Beach. And that's not to offend the people of Palm Beach. And I'm actually assigned as a deacon to the Diocese of Palm Beach. It's not about us, the people living there or the land itself. But there is a problem in Palm Beach that they're trying to eradicate. And we could talk about that a little bit later, because that brings in the extremely heinous situation of Jeffrey Epstein, which Mr. Kraft brought to himself by hiring Jack Goldberger as his lawyer. Right?
We broke sure, please continue.
No, we'll talk about it. But the second problem that we're seeing here, besides the very large and the most significant problem, is we can't even be seen at all to have any kind of laissez-faire attitude towards the sex trade because of the devastation done to Haiti. Okay? The second issue is, as a U.S. citizen, as a person that believes in the rule of law, as a person working in Haiti where people don't have access to courts properly, where there isn't proper adjudication, where there isn't the rule of law the way it should be, when you're faced with somebody using the courts for a technical play in order to keep their reputation, Mr. Kraft has made his reputation and his needs greater than, let's take, for instance, Ms. Herzog, the everyday health inspector who went into that spot and did her job. She went in there, she noted things were not the way they should be, and she spoke out against the issues of public safety and public health. And now she's being grilled. Her life is being put under the microscope, and she doesn't have the defense lawyers that Mr. Kraft can amass. And it's just an unfair system that he would come into it and allow his lawyers to aggressively badger everyday civil servants that are actually just out there. I'd like to see the sex trade removed from Palm Beach and the surrounding counties, right? So that's the second problem. Running roughshod over these individuals, that presents a tremendous problem in the situation.
Let me ask you a question. All these judgments are above certainly my pay grade, but about a year and a half ago, nearly 2 years ago in August, we broke the story of the collapse of the St. Joseph's Health Services Pension Fund. And subsequent to that, we've probably written 100 stories, been at all the court hearings, and the receiver has filed fraud lawsuits both against the hospital that owned them as well as the Diocese of Providence. And those are very serious fraud charges. There's, I can't remember the exact count, 30 counts against them. It's being tried both in federal and in state court jointly. And if you talk to a lot of the retired women, primarily women, who worked in St. Joseph's, gave their lives to health care, gave their lives to the Catholic Church, they feel that they were treated immorally by at least this diocese here. How do you make those judgments? If the Diocese of Providence wanted to make a donation to your organization, do you start to think about those things as well? That case is progressing right now.
That's a very interesting and complex question that I'll have to do some reflection upon. I have no idea of given your summary, I have no idea that the diocese is, providing me with support. The support that we get from the diocese is largely the good guidance that Bishop Tobin provides as having jurisdiction over us for morals and faith.
Sure.
The amount of money that the diocese provides is significant to us, but you would not call it significant. It's significant because it allows us to see ourselves as recognized as a mission. So we do not ask Bishop Tobin to provide us with a lot of resources because we know that there are active things within the diocese that he needs to meet. Parishes and individuals, we are 99% funded through parishes and individuals. So we have very little diocesan giving. So, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm not a specialist in this, and you're talking about something highly complicated,
yeah.
I think I'm accused of a lot of things. Down here in Haiti, I sometimes I have to fix my own electricity, and I'm not an electrician. But in this case, I'm just going to demur to say that I'm not aware enough of this to talk about it in a intellectually sound way.
Sure. No, I totally understand. Let's talk a little bit about, some people have used this Bob Kraft incident to say, well, listen, I'm not going to make it as simple as boys being boys, but is it really time now to rethink the sex trade industry and to make it legalized, just like we're moving forward with marijuana and other what were considered sins, and now moving it more into the mainstream of legalization? Stop blaming the sex worker, who ultimately usually pays the highest price rather than the purchaser. Have you begun to think about that within the complexity of working in a country that was devastated by the sex industry, both from a standpoint of its moral compass, but also from the AIDS epidemic that took place in the country?
Well, I'm not sure. When I agreed to come on the show, I understood it was one episode. But if we can do this, if we can be on once a week for the next year, I think we can unpack this. But let me be clear. I do not believe that anybody profits from it. And I mean that, no pun intended. I do not believe in any way that is beneficial to society that prostitution be made legal. I join with Ed Acorn of the Providence Journal, who just wrote a brilliant editorial about that. There is nothing gained by society adopting that. There are places where it's done. I think they're few and far between, and they do not prove that the contribution is net beneficial to society. Prostitution, the sex trade, it represents a significant health and safety risk. It dehumanizes people. It automatically is objectification. Just quickly, I want to touch on something. When somebody smokes marijuana, they smoke marijuana.
Right.
As long as they don't put out the marijuana cigarette in somebody's eye, they are not abusing another individual necessarily, although the drug trade leads generally to a tremendous amount of abuse. But let's just say they grow their own, smoke their own. I'm totally against the legalization of marijuana as well, just as full disclosure. But what you're talking about when you say boys will be boys, if they went off and did it by themselves, and I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm not
I understand.
in any way trying to make a joke. I'm being serious. That would be one thing. But what we're talking about always involves other individuals. And I don't want to associate Mr. Kraft in any way with the tremendously far more heinous situation of Jeffrey Epstein. However, when you start to really look what prostitution involves, you have to understand that in Palm Beach, you could see why they're hyperly sensitive and don't find it to be funny at all or anything they're interested in. When you find out that in your city or in your county and in your city, depending on, I'm not completely conversant on the city lines of Palm Beach because it happens to happen on an island aspect. But the issue that you're talking about, is, again, I don't automatically put, Bob Kraft into this situation at all, okay?
Yeah.
But Jeffrey Epstein created literally a prostitution mill by recruiting, allegedly, and I think it's no longer alleged. In fact, I
believe he pled to the charges.
I will withstand his suit if I have maligned him in any way, because what I understand that he has done by the testimony of women, so many women, is he took young women and had them actually go out and recruit other young women.
Right. So
by hiring Jeffrey Goldberger, people can, I really open myself for criticism here because, shouldn't you be able to have whatever legal defense you want? In theory, that's true. But if I were Mr. Kraft, I would never associate myself with Jeffrey Goldberger because he was involved in what is being called the worst plea deal, most heinous plea deal ever cut in the history of the United States.
Patrick,
so I think you have to think about what the sex trade is really all about. It always involves a power play and the objectification of another human being. So no, I am not going to see any solution in in the idea of legalization or just saying this is something. And that's what caused me, by the way, to come forward. Actually, what caused me to come forward was when Judge Hanser said, this is a tawdry, otherwise unremarkable situation. It's not that at all.
Right.
It's prostitution is always remarkable because it's the kind of, socially adaptive part of a tremendously dangerous industry called the sex trade.
You made the decision to make this public. And what was your hope in making it public? I'm assuming it was not for the sole purpose of embarrassing Mr. Kraft, but it was for the purpose of what? Well,
first of all, I have no intention of embarrassing anybody.
Right.
And I think that Mr. Kraft, has contributed to his own situation.
Absolutely.
And I, in no sense, want to add to that. What I'm trying to do here is to get somebody who publicly stated that he wants to regain his reputation, and he stated this before he gave us the gift, by the way, right? Or, excuse me, again, I have to be clear. He offered us the gift. We never actually received the gift.
Right.
So, he stated, I want to regain my reputation and use my platform for good. So I'm not sure Mr. Kraft is going to listen to this conversation, but I'd like to once again offer him an opportunity to do 3 simple things to do that. 1, without any personal admission related to his case, okay, and related to the suppression of the film, without any relationship to that, I suggest that he step forward and simply say that the sex trade and prostitution are wrong. Some people might say, what a hypocrite if
Right.
he's allegedly done these things. We're all hypocrites in the long run. We cannot reform. You can't reform without being some form of a hypocrite. So if he's saying I'm reforming, the sex trade is wrong, I wanted nothing to do with that. Now that my eyes have been opened up and I can see the damage and I understand what I was allegedly involved in, or he could just say what people are involved in when they're involved in prostitution. Right. I denounce that, and I am going to make amends through supporting organizations that absolutely do not work for the legalization of prostitution, work for the option, the empowerment of young men and women who are caught up in it. And there's organizations in New York. I know one of them that I have some colleagues with, Restore. There's any organization he chooses, he can do that. Number 2, he needs to fire Jack Goldberger. He needs to make it clear that he understands what that does to that just goes to the core of us who are concerned with civility and in the properness. We're not talking about morality at all here. We're talking about human civility.
Yeah.
Okay? So he needs to do that. And then, what I suggest, he's got this amazing Haitian American football player named Sony Michel, who did an amazing job for him.
Right.
Let Sony Michel come forward, make a statement that he appreciates what the Haitian Project has brought to light, that Haiti has suffered tremendously from the sex trade, and that he appreciates why we stood up and said no and brought a light to this very difficult problem. And then the Patriots, Tom Brady and Sony Michel together, they all can get together and make a donation. If we're really worried about the children in Haiti continuing their education, that's how to do it. Make it clearly disassociated. But that's not what Dan Solera offered.
Right.
There is a problem in his offer in itself. Receiving an email out of the blue, we should go over how much, in fact, we pursued Mr. Kraft up until, the instance that he is involved in. But what you have to clearly understand is on April 10th, when I received that email, I think it was April 10th, there it was.
Right.
Everything we're experiencing right now, I knew was coming at us in that moment, because it was so unacceptable to receive, here's $100,000. You want it in lump sum or over 2 years? No holds barred, just, no questions. You're like, this is not appropriate interaction.
Right.
And we responded to that authentically because we're professionals. We know our role in society. So I responded and said, hey, this is not an appropriate offer. Here's how it could be appropriate. And Dan Solera just said, okay, fine, forget it, basically.
Yeah.
No more communication. So I'm saying here's an opportunity. Denounce prostitution, fire Jack Goldberger. You can continue his case, but get disassociated from that, and have Sony Michel step forward and say, this is on behalf of the Patriots. We want to set this differently. This is for you to do your work. We know that prostitution and these other things are wrong. We're making that clear. We're opening up opportunity that we can all live and move forward.
Let's just wrap up. First of all, I want to thank you for taking all the time. We do long format. We do have big conversations on GoLocal Live, and I appreciate you participating. And gosh, we'll take you back every week accordingly. But let's talk about it. How do you get the focus? How do you get the focus back on the work you're doing? I mean, you really are, I went through the statistics, you're creating a middle class there in a country that functionally has been exploited repeatedly and also been devastated a number of times through natural disasters. I mean, it almost feels like sometimes, I'm sure many people feel that way, that it's somewhat cursed sometimes, that there's just so much devastation that hits the community down there. How do you get the focus back on continuing to build over the 30 years and continuing to get energy and resources into a positive impact on Haiti?
I think that's quite simple, because education works. And when people understand that, they're going to change the philanthropy, the large philanthropists. I mean, I didn't come to this discussion or this issue with Robert Kraft completely without a broader, trying to address a broader issue. This is a very, very dramatic portion of an issue with philanthropy in general, right? For instance, the Gates Foundation, inside the United States, 90%, there's rough numbers, 90% on education, and 10% on something else. In the developing world, you flip that. They're 90% on health and very little on education. I mean, direct support of education. Now, you have to ask yourself, as much as we might be concerned about the quality of education in the United States, it is ubiquitous, right? Actually, children in this country have more health problems than they have education problems. And they're somewhat associated, but the issue is to say, why isn't more philanthropy that is going to the developing world going to education to empower people so they can do things for themselves?
Right.
So what I would ask, let's clear through the issues here, but it's not a small issue, because prostitution, the sex trade has to stay, right out there in front of us, because it is so heinously wrong and such a crippler and cruel treater of people and vulnerable people, especially young women, and especially in developing countries. But if we're going to look at the solution, the upstream solution, in 30 years of running our school, and I'm happy you've been part of 22 or 3 of those, our young men and women are graduating, going to university, and getting married, having a family, and building a foundation. They're not, fortunately, dying from AIDS. They're not participating in prostitution. We've only had a couple of students have children under the age of 21. And look at the success that education presents. No deaths to AIDS, no death at our school from our students to hepatitis and other transmittable diseases, because education helps a person galvanize themselves against even the most difficult situations. So that's what I'd really like to get the focus back to. I'd really like to get the focus back on, let's fund the right things in developing countries. So if everything came out of this, what I would hope would be Bob Kraft making the right moves for society and unleashing all of us from this. Is no reason to brutally treat so many people as you're trying to protect your reputation, right? So let's release us from that. Let's disassociate the two things. Let's move on. And then if people want to move on with great joy and with great power, I'd love to have $75 million so I can build 9 more schools in Haiti, and we can cause what happened in Port-au-Prince all over the island. And that represents less than 1% of what Mr. Gates needs to spend a year. The amount of philanthropy that is moving is, maybe we should never want to say it's sufficient. It's not enough, baby. But it is a lot more than people think. It's just moving in the wrong directions. And that's the dialogue that that's the debate I actually prepared for. That's what I'm trying to get people to see. But if somebody is going to cause the sex trade to be minimized and other things made more important, sometimes it's sufficient reason to do something of grave importance, to make sacrifice and to stand up just because you can.
Right.
Again, the ability to see clearly what is wrong is sufficient reason to do something about it. So there really isn't this sort of complex why. It's a simple why. We can see from the vantage point from Haiti that this situation needs to be unlocked by human beings do the best of things, not the things that do the best for them.
Patrick Moynihan, I want to thank you for Skyping in from Haiti. Congratulations on your work over the past 20 plus years, the impact you've had there. For folks who are viewing in, the amount of the gift from Bob Kraft was $100,000. It represents a significant portion. Your annual budget is under $2 million for the work you do there.
Yes, it
so
is.
this was not a $25 gift on a $50 million annual budget. This was a significant opportunity for your organization. We will want to check back in with you over the next
Sure.
months and have conversations both about this and Haiti and how the United States can be a better world leader. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and the energy. We will also, when we publish this tomorrow, this has gone out live to 9 different social media platforms, but when we publish this tomorrow, we will have all the links in, and we'll embed that Vimeo video that you have, that Education Works, because I do think it's important that people focus on the work you're doing down there in Haiti. Congratulations on all the great work you do.
Thank you very much, and do have me back because I would love to discuss our expansive network, which is in that Vimeo, and how education is the number one developmental tool that helps people find their way and build their own lives. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. For everybody tuning in, we're going to go off. Kate Nagel is live at the State House with the legislative leaders introducing the education reform package. We're going to be back in a little while here in the GoLocal studios here on Weybosset Street with General Centracchio, Ed Inicelli, and Jennifer Lawless from University of Virginia talking about what's going on in D.C. Thanks, everybody.